Well, in this video, I want to talk a bit more about concepts in the philosophy of self, and particularly related to the situated self, and in particular, direct perception. And I want to talk about this actually in the context in response to phenomenology and philosophy of mind in particular, and on a paper that was written by Frank Jackson, and this is the Mary's room. So some of you might be familiar with this, and the paper actually discusses this concept that's very central to the hard problem of consciousness, which has to do with the whether or not we can know the physiological, psychophysiological basis or the neural correlates to conscious experience, conscious awareness. And the easy problem has to do with whether or not we can know if consciousness exists at all. And it's called easy because we have direct access to these conscious experiences. Often, and what I also add here is that it's through perception primarily rather than consciousness. Conscious awareness is a component, constituent of perception, and involves also cognition as well, which we actually do. We can get to the correlates of both perception and cognition. Those are not as phenomenologically or psychologically complicated in terms of this hard problem and the easy problem of consciousness that we see arising in the philosophy of mind. And when we're talking about uh, conscious experience, there's a useful term that will pop up a lot in philosophy of mind and also phenomenology called qualia. And qualia has to do with the quality of experience. You see that root word qualia there. It's that direct quality of a perception that's occurring within the precept. It could be associated with an image regarding visual experience or even imagination, something that's retained in the mind's eye, visualizing something, even in terms of processing visual information or predicting information when you're drawing, say. There's also auditory information, similar to that there too, more audio-based information. You see that root word audio, and then or auto, and then there's also motor sense, which is associated with qualia, various textures that are transduced into precept, and uh, gustatory, which is taste, so simulation of various tastes and tasting sensation. And you'll notice that the olfactory system, so smell, is very aligned with the taste system. And often too, if like especially if you start cooking more and you start to you become more experienced in both eating what you cook and cooking, you'll become more sensitive, I think, to these experiences, these qualia in experience, and be able to recognize them more through these direct perceptions, which I'll get to actually probably in an upcoming video and discuss that more. But just stick on track. The Mary's room thought experiment, pertains to the situation in which you have this individual Mary, who's a color scientist essentially, and she knows pretty much all the facts about color, and in particular, focus on red, the color red. And she knows everything about the color red, but she's in this room that has no color. The quality of red is completely removed, so there's no color experience of red that can occur within that room. It's not necessarily that she hasn't she's unable to see red. It's that she hasn't been exposed to red, and this is a key component here. So she hasn't been exposed to the quality of red, the wavelength, but she has information regarding, say, the wavelength of red, uh, various properties of red, such as uh, its frequency, how it's formed in light, regarding photons, for example. So she knows all these properties regarding red and color, but she doesn't have direct access, direct perceptions to red. So we can imagine her going outside the room and seeing red. And so, what's the difference there? And the difference that Frank Jackson argues is this experience of qualia, which distinguishes the easy problem of consciousness from the hard problem of consciousness, having to do with, well, we know that consciousness exists and that there's these differences between consciousness and, say, cognition or information processes even to some degree perception, but perception synthesizes both of those, right? It has a cognitive process embedded within a conscious process, and there's these reciprocal associations or reciprocal relations that we can form associations. They're different too. That's important to understand, because those associations will inform subsequent perceptions, subsequent motivations, subsequent emotions, subsequent feelings, subsequent actions. Similarly to in the case of Mary, she's still having conscious experiences, right? But it's domain specific to this deprivation of red, but the inclusion of, say, semantic information, like words on text, or maybe it's auditory information that she also gets access to, hearing people talk about red, maybe on like broadcasts, because who knows what's in this room, right? But she has still both these access through perception to both a conscious and a cognitive modality. And when she goes outside and she's exposed to red, she experiences the quality of red, which is associated with that hard problem of consciousness that is really, really hard to quantify or to study scientifically and empirically, though we can access that through our direct perception, similar to Mary in this case. And this I want to respond to because it relates directly to empirical meaning, perceptual meaning, and synthetic meaning as you can see the empirical meaning directly there in the qualia, right? This hard problem of consciousness, which has to do with awareness, that gives Mary this added meaning to red through the quality of experience that has more to do with aesthetics and also self-subjectivity and herself. She's like, she could go, whoa, that's what red is? And then she could start to make an association between the qualia of red to her knowledge of red. And that can help her in terms of the recognition now of red and different various associations, and potentially come up with new theories or ideas from that new uh, interaction that's going on in her brain from that reciprocal relation, and forms that association that can influence her subsequent perceptions, motivations, emotions, feelings, actions, and behaviors in self through these direct perceptions. So it has a phenomenological basis, but she's doing most of her phenomenology in that room. But at the same time, there's always this direct perceptual psychology that's going on, and a direct perceptual philosophy that has a relation to directly to the self, that it involves a philosophy of self, and a philosophy regarding how we develop self-knowledge and knowledge of the surroundings directly. And this can inform perceptual meaning, and it often comes at the same time in simultaneity with perceptual meaning. So you have the empirical and the perceptual meaning often occurring together, but we form these synthetic relations often through recognizing the reciprocal relation and forming that association that can develop these synthetic or synthesis of meaning through a meaning process that can allow, for example, Mary to develop these greater theories, or recognize red and interact with it in various ways. And the synthetic will come out with when she starts to get more of these innovative ideas and starts to really pair the awareness of red, the quality of red, with her understanding and her perceptions of red. So that's the perception and empirical meaning starting to synthesize and produce a synthesis of meaning, where we get the synthetic process. And that's just a bit that I wanted to talk about there. And I'll probably be putting out a blog post on this and some writing on it. And I'm hoping to actually include an accession, a philosophical consideration responding more to phenomenology within the final edition or the official release of my book on synthetic meaning when it comes out on print, and I'm going to be releasing it on more virtual platforms. But right now it's just exclusively online, and primarily on Kindle. Though you can send me an email and I can provide you a link to where you can read it online. Um, that's it. I hope you enjoy. Bye.